Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a channel for people who can never get their fill of learning interesting things, seeing interesting places, and most of all checking out all kinds of cool planes while we do it. Today we're going to take a hop across the hills of Northern California to see what's going on this time of year at beautiful Mount Shasta, and we're leaving from Redding Municipal Kilo Romeo Delta Delta. And once we get going, we'll be zigzagging our way in a generally northbound direction for about 80 miles until we land at Weed Airport. Yes, Weed Airport, near the town of Weed, and that's Oscar 46. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to fly this giant suppository today, aka the Boeing 307 Stratoliner, a plane I just absolutely love because it's vintage. It's a little bit complicated. I'm going to make it a lot more complicated during this flight, and it looks absolutely beautiful inside and out. And if you don't already have this and you want to pick it up in the sim, right now it's on sale for $9.99, and I think it's always been on sale for that price because when I originally got it, it was one of the local legends. It was also $9.99 back then, so maybe it's a perma sale. One of the challenges I've had with this, and you probably have too if you have this plane, is getting it started. There are several tutorials. All the big sim channels did a tutorial on it, and all of them did it slightly differently, none of which I could get to work, including one that was produced by the developer of the plane. So apparently it was kind of a gripe from everybody. But I found a way to make it work, so if you're getting this thing and trying to fly it sometime around December of 2023, this will at least work for now. And you're going to have to set up a couple of different custom cameras around the cockpit because you have to move around a little bit. And the first thing we're going to do is slide over to the flight engineer seat. And what you have to do to get it going initially is turn the ground power on. And when you turn that on, that's also what puts the chocks and all that out there. I'll show you what turns the fuel truck on here in just a second. If you start the plane started, like start at the end of a runway, all of these valves will be set in the inboard, outboard, extra tanks over here. Well, these are all inboard. But all the tutorials said switch it to the mains. It seems to fly just fine if you leave it as it is, but I'm going to switch it to the mains because that's been working for me, and I've run out of gas several times in this plane while in the air, and I can't really figure out exactly how these valves map over to the actual tanks because they have different names in the sim. So I just filled this thing almost all the way up, so we should be fine since we're just going 80 miles. And to complicate things a little bit further, they've got these cross-feed valves over here, which most of the tutorials said turn to on. But you can see right here it says must be in the off position during takeoff. And if you start in the sim with it configured for takeoff, these are also off, so I'm just going to leave those alone for now as well. All right, everything looks good over here for now, so let's slide over to the co-pilot seat. While we're here, once we get it all turned on, switching this lever to the all the way down position also shuts off that ground power switch, so you won't have to go back to that panel, but we do need to remember to turn that thing off once we're done. All right, so to get this started, it's pretty simple. You just turn the inverters on, and then you're going to hit the proper sequence is boost, prime, wait 5 seconds, then hit start, then hit the mags. I found you don't have to wait 5 seconds if you don't want to, but we will because we're real like that. And you can even turn all the mags on initially if you want to, and it'll start when you hit start. But we're going to do it how you're supposed to do it, at least according to all the tutorials that I saw. And you can see under that red bar right there that these move in both directions. So this is engine 1, 4, 2, and 3. So we'll do 1, 3, 2, and 4. And so get that going. Boost, prime, 2, 3, 4, 5. Start, and hit the mags. I feel like I wish the engines were a little bit more throaty sounding, and if you want, you can open the window. Doesn't change the sound, though, unfortunately, but at least that's animated. And from the outside of the plane, they do sound a little deeper and throatier, but it's kind of quiet, so if I was to put something in the suggestion box, it maybe modify the sounds a little bit, but maybe it really does sound like this on the inside. As I'll tell you about later, there aren't many of these you can fly today, so it's hard to know exactly what it would sound like. Okay, let's do engine number 3 next. Boost, prime, and start. Hit the mags. Got a good start on 3. Number 2, boost, prime, and start. Hit the mags. And number 4, last but not least, boost. Whoa, not that one. Good grief, not that one. And start. All right, we got 4 good starts. Okay, so let's slide back over here, and let's turn this thing off all the way down. That'll get rid of our chocks and everything, and get us off of ground power. All right, so here's how I'm going to make this even more complicated for us today. This does have the old Sperry auto gyro. I think that's what that's called. Old school semi-autopilot. It'll do heading hold, and it'll do vertical speed hold and altitude hold. but it will not do, at least I couldn't figure out how to make it do it, any kind of navigational tracking. And if you want to turn the modern cockpit stuff off over here, you can hit this switch and it'll just bring up some of the old traditional course deviation indicators up there, which will follow whatever nav radio signals you have in there. And I think it even has a GPS setting, so even if you have a GPS plan mapped out, it'll still follow that with the CDIs that'll pop up over there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually change our headings as we're flying this thing. So I've got a little NavMap pulled up on the left that'll tell us our heading changes, and of course it'll come up on our map as we're following our route. And if you like this route, of course, as always, I'll have it included in the video description, and it's going to be pretty cool. The only thing I'd complain about, we have no add-ons included. There's none available, not even payware. It looks like it's fall here. Eventually it's going to shift over to all green trees, and it's an unnatural shift because you can see the borders where that happens, but other than that, all the landscape's going to look pretty cool. The airports look good enough. So no complaints, and it's just a beautiful place to fly. Okay, all that looks really good. I just need to remember to, and I'm not going to adjust it down here, although you could as far as our heading, because I would need to turn the tooltips on to see precisely the heading, and I don't want to break our immersion. So I'll be adjusting that with my external hardware. And while I'm thinking about it, let me go ahead and get our initial heading, which is going to be 344, just in that there, so I don't have to fool with that once we get going. And then we'll move all the way down to our runway there, which we're right next to. All right, 344, so that's good. All right, taxi lights on. And this, you can see, has lots and lots of levers, which is awesome. I've got all of our prop controls mapped to one, our mixture mapped to another one. It does have auto rich, auto lean. I'll probably just leave it full bore so I don't have to keep switching the camera angles because we're not going to run out of gas on this. But I do have my 3D printed throttle levers that I use for the DC-6 over here connected to these, so I can get a fistful of throttles as we're moving it around, which is just awesome. And if you guys haven't picked up any of those, you can get them from, there's a couple guys on Etsy that make them, and I can't remember the name of his store, but if you ask me in the comments, if I forget to put a link to it in the description, I'll send that over to you. I've got them for all kinds of planes, all the liners. He makes them for all the liners, the DC-3, any vintage planes I can get them for. And they're not cheap, but I like to display them. I've got them all sitting up above my sim pit, and it just looks really cool because you can get little stands for them too. All right, enough about that. Parking brake off. And because we've got so much gas in this thing, we're going to have to give it a little bit of juice to get going. Oh, you know what? Let's get our fuel truck out of the way before we run over him and erupt into a huge fireball. That'll get rid of him. All right, let's do this. So the runway is just right ahead of us, but we got to kind of weave our way over to it here. How's our barrel? That's good. I turned the live weather off because it's pouring rain out here right now, so that was no good. And I turned on the high cloud setting. And the time of day is at about 10 a.m. Another challenging thing about this plane, because of the way the windows wrap around the nose of this thing, which does look a little bit like a suppository, you always feel like you're a little bit too far off to the right when you're actually not. So getting the center line right about there will get the nose wheel over the center line. But it makes it particularly challenging for landing, which I'm not really good at because, one, this is a tail dragger, two, we've got that perspective issue, and it is a big liner, so it likes to kind of float from side to side. You can't do any precise turns with this thing. Our maximum altitude on this flight will be about 8,000 feet. We won't need to be there until we get out by Shasta. So we'll start at around 3,000 or so, till we get away from Redding here. Okay, it says to put the tail wheel lock on for takeoff and landing, but it makes it even more challenging for me because if you're not lined up directly, which I'm usually not, it's hard to get that corrected as well. And you don't need any flaps for takeoff. So I think everything is good. What am I forgetting? All right, landing lights on, taxi lights off. We don't need flaps. I need to remember to get our throttles pulled back and our RPMs back once we get up. And I think we're good to go. And as soon as you're up, it'll have a positive rate of climb. In fact, it'll take itself off, so we can get the gears up as soon as we're off the ground. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn on our terrain map up here just because we want to really try not to hit anything. That should be fine. All right. Transponders on. You guys ready? Let's do this. Man, there is just nothing like grabbing a big fistful of throttles. Once we get up in the air, I'll tell you a little bit about the town of Redding and everything else we're flying over, as always. And when we're done, we'll look at everything on little NavMap as usual as well, so we can see some of the details that we might miss as we're cruising over in the air here. All right, we've got the tail wheel up and rudder authority. We'll be in the air here in just a moment. We'll go ahead and give it a little bit of back pressure since we're squeaking the tires. Gear up. And once we get off the end of the runway, I'll go ahead and set our initial heading. Okay, pull the throttles back some. And we will need to give it some more throttle once we get going, because as we're climbing, it's going to lose some power. All right, keep that in the green. And landing lights off. All right, let's do our heading hold. We're good there. Check out our vertical speed. And we'll go up at 500 feet a minute just so I can keep tabs on that, along with everything else. So a little bit about the town of Redding while we're in the vicinity. For one thing, you can tell even from the sim that it looks like it's an absolutely beautiful place to live. Situated right along the Sacramento River, just north or just south of Lake Shasta. And I'll tell you about both of those, the river and the lake, once we get out there. But as far as proximity to any big cities, Sacramento is probably the closest, and that's about 150 miles to the south. And the first Easterners to arrive out here were Russian fur traders in the early 1800s, and that's the first time we've heard about Russians out in these parts. All right, 3:06 in 9 seconds, so let's get ready for that. I'm looking at my GPS map up there. And let's do it, 3:06. But like most of the rest of California, things really took off out here when gold was found in the hills just a little northwest of town. But like most of the rest of California, there wasn't much of it, earning the town its original name of Poverty Flats. And once everyone recovered from gold fever, things chilled out for a while, and the place nearly became a ghost town until they started working on the Shasta Dam in the 1940s, and we'll get a good look at that baby in a few minutes. And these days, it seems to mostly be a place for people who can afford to get away from the cities and enjoy a little slice of heaven, mixed with only an occasional slice of hell, because they've had some pretty serious wildfires out here over the last few decades. One of them in 2018, called the Carr Fire, C-A-R-R, destroyed over 1,000 buildings and killed 6 people. All right, here's the Sacramento River out here, and it's going to bend this way. And right on the corner of it over here, and then crossing over to the other side, is an area called Turtle Bay, which seems to be like a little children's hands-on museum. They got some gardens and animals and stuff and some museums in there. And this thing going across here is a pedestrian bridge, and initially I thought this thing sticking up in the air was a glitch in the sim. But that is a huge sundial. This is called the Sundial Bridge. That thing is 217 feet tall and is a functioning sundial. And though it claims to be the largest in the world, there's one in Taiwan that's a little bit bigger. But connecting to it, if you look at pictures on the ground, all the cables that support the bridge run off the side of it here. Very cool. All right, when we take this next turn, and I'm only coming over here because there's a smaller dam called the Keswick Dam that I want to try to spot. They started building that 5 years after the Shasta was done. And they built it, one, because it's a hydro dam and they wanted it to provide power, but also to control the flow of the Sacramento River when they open up the Shasta at peak hours. All right, 263 will be next for our heading. 2-1, and then I'll get our vertical speed under control. 263, okay. All right, so we're at about 3,000 feet, which is right about where I want to be right now, so we'll flatten that out. And you can see how the trees are changing over here, which is just really unfortunate. I tried fooling around with AccuSeason, but it was making it look like that no matter what I set it at. So once we get past this, it'll all be green, and it'll look pretty cool. And this looks unusually orange, so I don't know what's going on with that. It seems to be overriding AccuSeason because I tried to make it all summertime, since that's what this looks like. All right, so the Keswick Dam is going to be somewhere around here if we can see it at all. And this is the first time I've tried flying out over here because I just wanted to see if we could spot it. So we'll see. Very small compared to the Shasta Dam. All right, I think this is going to be it right here, but we got to turn here in just a second. And we're heading to what, 11? Yeah, that's it. See where the road crosses over there? But we got to turn. I'll show you that on the satellite map if you want to go take another look at that. But we don't want to miss the Shasta. All right, going to 11 degrees, and there we are. So the Shasta was completed in 1945, and it's 602 feet high. It is the 8th tallest in the U.S. And no, the Hoover is not the biggest. I thought it was. That's number 2. The tallest, which I'd never heard of, is the Oroville Dam, also in California, about halfway between here and Sacramento. And of course, we'll get down there to check that out at some point. But they started making plans to build the Shasta here in 1919, and we're going to try to fund it by selling bonds issued by the state. But the Depression put it into that because nobody could afford them, so instead they made it a public works project, providing thousands of very much needed jobs and helping put the town of Redding back there on the map. It's going to be right on the other side of this mountain over here. And aside from providing power, and it provides a decent amount of that, not an insane amount, about 700 megawatts is what it puts out right now. They also built it to create Lake Shasta back here behind it, which provides some very much needed reservoir water for the area. There's the dam there. And that is not a point of interest, and that's not an add-on, but it looks pretty good, especially from here. And you can tell that thing is big. So the Orville Dam, which is the biggest, is about 150 feet higher than that and narrower, so that probably looks pretty cool. We'll definitely get down there to check that out. And we're almost done with this weird scenery here. But that thing was considered an engineering marvel for its time. The only people who weren't really thrilled about it were the Native Americans, who, like usual, got no say in the matter, despite the submersion of their sacred tribal lands out here. But hey, progress, right? So there's Lake Shasta, providing some almost clean power. And incidentally, this is also the largest man-made reservoir in the state of California, going down 517 feet in the deepest spot. Okay, we're about to turn to 57, so we'll get ready for that. And 57. All right. But it goes down 517 feet in the deepest spot and has 365 miles of shoreline, which is just a bit more than all of San Francisco Bay. And aside from a few marinas, one of them is down here that we won't really be able to see because it's kind of sunk in the water, there's really not any habitation around here. There's one little touristy town up on one of the northern branches, but that's about it. And this bridge right here, which looks fantastic, and is also not an add-on, so very good looking for not being an add-on, is called the Pitt River Bridge, which is kind of interesting because we just flew over a Pitt River up in Vancouver, although this one just has one T. And the road that's going across it there is Interstate 5, which runs all the way from the southern border of the U.S. down by San Diego up to the northern border just south of Vancouver. Pretty important highway. That was another part of putting Reading on the map. All right, we got to take another turn here at 355. And if we weren't trying to look at all this stuff, I would have made it a straight shot, but we got stuff to see. All right, 355. And that little thing going across the water down there that you'll see in just a second is not a tiling effect in the water. That's actually some power lines running across there, which is amazing that they could get the detailing of that right, but not get the boats in the marina right, but that's just what happens in the sim. But look at this. This is beautiful. Just beautiful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start our climb up to 8,000 feet because we got to be at 8,000 before we get to Mount Shasta. So I'll start a slow climb up there. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Sacramento River before we get away from it, which is, again, the thing they dammed up to make this lake. That baby flows from north to south for about 400 miles before emptying into San Fran Bay, and it starts in the mountains just up ahead of us here. I'll show you roughly where that is. We won't see the start of it, but I'll show you the mountain near which it starts. And the river was a course of travel and trade for Native Americans going back to as many as 12,000 years ago, contributing to the Sacramento Valley having one of the densest concentrations of ancient cultures on the West Coast, which is pretty interesting. All right, how's our terrain looking? We look good. We're roughly on our track, so everything is going well. All right, we'll give it a little more throttle since we've been climbing some. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and go, well, let me get it set to... Nope, not that one. We'll pull it down to auto rich. Not that we need to conserve fuel, but why not? Just because I've got the lever for it. All right, so while we have a few minutes, can I tell you guys a little about this plane? Because it's awesome. The Stratoliner was based on several design components of the B-17 Flying Fortress. Obviously, not the front of the fuselage, which does indeed look like a suppository. And maybe, God willing, if we say our prayers, someone will make a B-17 for the sim, but I don't know if that's going to happen before 2024. But if you look at the wings and the engines and the tail in particular, that was the stuff that they were pulling from the design of the B-17. And it took its first flight in 1938, and I think the first flight crashed. And I think it had a TWA representative on it because they were one of the first people that wanted orders for it, but it flew out, one of the wings ripped off, then the other one ripped off, and the thing crashed, killing everyone on board. But that didn't stop Pan Am from placing a few orders. The first one was rolled out to them in 1940 as the first passenger liner with a pressurized cabin, meaning it could cruise at up to 20,000 feet versus the formerly popular DC-3, which topped out at around 8,000. And it can also move a bit faster than the DC-3. This thing can cruise, they say, although I haven't really gotten it up there without really putting the engines where I don't like putting them. But they say it can cruise at 220 miles per hour. I don't know what that converts to in knots, but it's a bit faster than the DC-3 as well. It was crewed by up to 4 on the flight deck, with 2 pilots, the flight engineer, whose seat we saw there, and if you really felt lonely, you could squeeze a navigator back there as well if you wanted to. And man, if you've never been inside one of these cockpits in real life, which would be hard to do for reasons I'll tell you about in a minute, it has a ton of room in it. I went inside a DC-3 in a museum one time and was shocked by how tight that was, because in the sim you don't get a sense of just how tight that is, unless you got your co-pilot sitting next to you. But this thing has tons of space. You could have a party up here. So see if you can find a picture of the inside of this thing online. It's pretty incredible. And I also, in the Smithsonian in DC, they have, if you've ever been up there, just the cockpit section of a 747. I was shocked at how tight that was too. I figured that would be bigger for such a massive plane, but it's pretty tight. The initial seating capacity of this baby was around 33, later increased to 60, and the cabin is fully modeled in here. You can't walk back there from the cockpit. You have to go into drone view, and then you can look in there. All right, we got to go to 321. So let's do that. Look at this scenery. Just spectacular. Unfortunately for the old Stratoliner, fate would have other plans for the future of this beast, namely the introduction of planes like the Constellation, of which Lockheed produced 856 versus just 10 of the old Stratos here. And I don't feel like we're climbing quite fast enough, so I'm going to adjust that some, because we got to get to 8,000 feet. I'm mostly concerned about just clearing these mountains right here. We can adjust accordingly a little bit later on. And you know what else is interesting? I don't know if this is an aviation thing that I've just always missed on these old planes, but look how the number 8 is represented here on the altimeter. It's a 6, which really threw me off the first time I was flying this. But maybe they did that on all these old planes and I just never noticed it. So the only surviving model of this plane sits in the Smithsonian Annex at Dulles Airport, and it was flown there under its own power in 2002. But unfortunately, shortly after takeoff, the thing crashed because it ran out of gas somewhere near Seattle, which maybe it was at the Boeing factory before that. I think everyone survived that, but they hauled it up out of the water, rebuilt it again, and once again flew by its own power out to DC, which is pretty cool. And that thing is in flight condition, just in case anyone feels like taking her out for a little spin. All right, we'll give it some more throttle, because we have some bandwidth over there. Looking good. Everything's looking good. T's and P's all look good. All right. And I know we got plenty of gas for now. Just keeping an eye on our airspeed there, because I am climbing at a pretty brisk pace, and it looks like we're okay. So this big mountain up ahead of us here is Mount Eddy, and that rises to about 9,000 feet, and somewhere near that is where the Sacramento starts before it starts winding its way down here, the Sacramento River. So we're going to come over this initial ridge here, and then we're going to cut this way, stay on this side of Mount Shasta, because we don't want to try flying over it. That thing's huge. It would take forever to fly around it. So we're going to cut through here, and then Weed and its airport is going to be somewhere over this mountain over here. And we're going to have to come down pretty quick. The runway for Weed is at about 3,000 feet, and we're going to be at around 8,000 once we hit Mount Shasta. So along with trying to navigate this thing with our heading controls, I'm going to have to keep an eye on our descent, which is all going to be a lot of fun, and our airspeed, which is also tough to control. And as you're going to see, landing it is really hard because this runway is really skinny. It's plenty long enough, but really skinny, and because of the weird perspective in this thing, it's kind of hard to get yourself lined up if you're hand flying it in, which of course we are going to do, because it's hard, and hard is fun. And pay attention over here, because we're not going to be able to see it once we start heading right at Shasta. There's a big ski complex over here called the Shasta Ski Bowl, and that does have some historical significance, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. Just want to get over these mountains without hitting them. All right, let's take a look outside. How's all that look? Really nice, of course. And this is the Cascade Range. This is not the Rockies. The Rockies are a little bit further to the east. And if you keep going north, you'll hit things like Mount St. Helens, of course, Rainier eventually once you get up there. I took a flight out to Mount St. Helens, maybe for one of our flights, and it looks cool. There's just nothing else around there to talk about, so it takes a little bit of a hike to get out there from the nearest airport. And I was in that Lightning too, so I ran out of things to talk about even in the Lightning, traveling at over 500 knots, so that one may just have to be for some other channel. But it looks cool. Mount St. Helens does. Okay, we're at 8,000, so we'll stop our ascent. And we're not quite ready to turn yet, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on that. Let's zoom out a little bit on our map so I can see that coming up. All right, we got a little bit of time. So as we turn through here, we're going to see a couple mountains. There's going to be a little one over here called Black Butte, which really doesn't look much like a butte. It looks more like a volcano. And then, of course, Shasta will completely fill up our front windscreen here. And then we're going to come over this way and try real hard to navigate that little valley there, which is going to be somewhat of a challenge, but will be cool. The most interesting thing about Black Butte, which actually is a volcano, I think it was a, what they call a component volcano, where it's comprised of several different cones that kind of built up on top of each other. And it's not real big. That's it right there. You can barely see it through the haze. We'll get a nice look at it because we're going to fly right next to it. But the most interesting thing about that place is what we're going to see at the foot of it, on this side of it. There's something on the ground that claims to be the biggest mandala on Earth. And if you don't know what a mandala is, that's perfectly fine, because I didn't know either, unless you're into Native American medicine, because it's a medicine wheel. And I don't even know what a medicine wheel does, but I think it's a Navajo thing. I don't even know if the Navajos are out here. But they built a big one out there, and they say it's the biggest one in the world. And we'll get a good look at it when we come by. I did find the website for the Mount Shasta Spiritual Retreat Center, which is right at the base of Black Butte over there, of which I think the medicine wheel has some association. And there was a video right on their main page of a naked girl doing something that appeared to be somewhat spiritual. So if that's any indication of what you do at a mandala, yeah, I'd check it out. And man, it's a good thing Chet's not with us today, because he would want me to put this thing down right on top of the butte if they got naked girls running around down there. And it was weird. It was real weird. And she was kind of like down in a ravine of some kind, and there didn't appear to be any ravines over there, so I don't know what was going on with that. There was no words or anything to it, so it was just weird. But it looked very spiritual. Okay, we're about to take our next turn here, so let me just keep an eye on that. I think it's right when we come over the ridge of this mountain. And it looks like we're going to be okay for our altitude. We may even be a little high, so I'm going to slowly start coming down. Let's just say 200 feet a minute. See how we do with that. So I think that's Mount Eddy out there, which would mean the start of the Sacramento River is somewhere over here. And this thing is about 9,000 feet. Just a baby compared to Mount Shasta, which I'll tell you about here in just a sec once we make this turn. But all that terrain landscape scenery looks real nice. Really, really nice. And there's the Butte over there. And man, I took so many different flights on this plane. It was really tough to find something that would work well for it, because we have to have something that doesn't have a lot of details to look at on the ground, because the field of view is not great. It doesn't climb really well, so I couldn't do too much mountain stuff, especially if we had to climb fast. Finally found this one, which I think is just perfect, because I never get to fly any liners, and you know I love vintage planes, so this works well for what we're doing here. All right, just get ready for this turn. Should be telling me about that in just a second. Can we see the ski bowl? Just barely. See it right there out that window? Right over here. Okay, we're going to 37. So we'll get ready for that. 2, 1, and 37 now. Boy, this is tricky. I hope I'm making it seem a lot easier than it is, but to try to, if I wasn't trying to narrate and look at stuff on the ground, it'd be a lot easier. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and enjoy this plane. Considering how hard it was to find this flight for it, may not get to see this one too much more often, and it's such an incredibly rare plane, and of some historic significance. It was worth trying to make it work. Okay, so let's see if we can spot this medicine wheel. It's going to be right down in here, and once we get up next to it, you will be able to see it better. But while we're heading over there, I'll tell you some info about Mount Shasta. That thing goes up to 14,000 feet, making it the second highest mountain in the Cascade Range and the 5th highest in California. And just from the terrain down here, it goes up about 10,000 feet. And you can see it does look impressive. Can we get down and really see the top of it there? Look at that. Amazing. All right, I'm going to keep coming down even a little faster because we need to get down, so let's try 500 feet a minute. Just keep an eye on that. And Shasta is a volcano. Probably won't be surprised to hear that, but it hasn't done much in a while. The last eruption that we know about was around 1250 AD, so there were probably some people out here, but no European Americans. And other than its prominence, It has the distinction of receiving the highest amount of snowfall from one storm, from a single storm in U.S. history. And that happened right over here, at least it was measured over here at the ski bowl, where they got over 15 feet over the course of 3 days. That's a lot of snow. I think I may have seen the fastest accumulation of snowfall when I spent the night on an interstate out in Buffalo in the year 2000. In the course of just a couple hours, it got up to my tops of my wheels, and the National Guard had to come dig us out. And there was thunder and lightning in a snowstorm. I have never seen that. All right, so there it is. There's the medicine wheel. Don't see any naked women running around, though. You turning yet? Nope. So they say that's the biggest one in the world. Check it off your list. Now you've seen it. And if you're into UFOs, you probably know some of the lore which goes all the way back to the indigenous people about this mountain. They say they have a lot of strange sightings of flying objects around here that they say go right down into the mountain. One of my favorite theories about this place, which is entirely unfounded so far, is that there may be a portal to an alien underworld civilization somewhere on Mount Shasta. Wouldn't that be something? All right, so if our runway is at 3,000 feet, eventually we want to get down to 5,000 feet, but I don't want to do that too soon or we're going to have a real problem here, but we're about to turn, so let's take care of that. Going to a heading of 320. And we'll go now. All right, so once we get lined up with the runway, I'm going to try my best to hand fly this thing in, but it is a skinny runway, and as I said before, this thing is tough, and it's a tail dragger, so no rating of this landing, unless you want to send me videos of you trying to land it. Of course, it would only be your best videos, I'm sure, so that's really probably a moot point. All right, so I think we're going to clear this. That's what I was most concerned about, so we can start coming down even a little bit more, because we're just now at 7,000 feet, so we got 2,000 more feet to go. We got to take another turn here, so let's get that out of the way, and we'll start slowing down some too. What does that say, 248? All right. And there we go. All right, so let's adjust our vertical speed. We'll come down at 1,000 feet a minute till we get down to 5,000 feet. And we'll start slowing down some more. Okay, man, I can't tell you guys, I mentioned a few videos ago, I've got some helicopter controls and a stick finally coming from Virpil, but everything was so back-ordered, I'm afraid it's going to be after the holidays before that comes in. And I'm sure it'll take me a while to figure... Look at that, there's Bold Black Butte. Looks nothing like a butte, but it does look like a composite volcano, doesn't it? Fantastic, looks really good. So I'll be spending a few days, as soon as I get that stuff in, trying to get it all connected. Everything's set up for that. That'll be a lot of fun once we get that going. And who knows, I might start trying to fly some more fighters once I have a proper stick to do it with. All right, we need to slow down some more, or we're going to be in some serious trouble here. We're going to be too high. And we'll go ahead and get our landing lights on while I'm thinking about it. All right, so we got 1,000 feet to go, and we got to turn to a heading of 324, it looks like. And here we go. And because this is not flying on autopilot, we probably won't be lined up just right, but we'll see how we look. See if we can spot the runway. And once I get somewhat straight, I'll start trying to hand fly it. We'll get our gears out and all that stuff. 500 feet to go. And we'll go ahead and give it full mixture again. All right, runway. I can never spot this thing until I feel like I'm too doggone close to it. All right, so we'll flatten out now. That little clicking sound is the trim adjusting. Okay, I'm guessing that that's it right there, which would be great if it was. All right, slow down even more so we can get these gears out. I think 160 is the gear speed. As soon as I do that, autopilot's coming off. All right, gears out. And we'll get one notch of flaps out. And we got greens on the gear, so we'll start coming down. So I think the approach speed is around 120, and then the VREF is around 90. So So we'll try to get down there, and I feel like we're a little high. In fact, I know we're a little high, so we'll just keep pulling the throttle back and slowing down. Coast on in there. And being a great big liner, this thing moves about like a liner. No quick movements at all, even if you want it to be quick. All right, we're at 100 now, so we'll go ahead and give it a little bit of throttle. Just trying to manipulate. If you wanted to come around from the other side, it's really flat the other way for a good distance out there. So if you don't want to try to navigate all these mountains coming in here, you could always do that. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit just so I can see how closely I'm lined up with our line here, which appears to be pretty close. All right, full flaps. And we're a little low and a little slow, so we'll speed it up some. But I like our angle of attack right now, and our speed seems to be pretty good. We seem to be oriented the correct way, but we do need some more throttle. So you would think we were lined up just right now, but I can tell you from past experience that we're not. And this runway is real skinny, so just forgive me if I go to the grass on the side, but there's nothing else out here, so if we go in the grass, we go in the grass. See if I can do it without hopping. All right, airspeed looks good. And it'll coast for a little while, so once we get over the threshold, we can probably just cut the throttle. Yep, it looks like we're too far to the right, but we're not. All right, so we'll cut the throttle. All right, full back pressure since this is a tail dragger. Give it some brakes. And I'm going to get us turned around just so we can have a nice view of Mount Shasta once we're stopped. Flaps up. Landing lights off. Taxi lights on. And once we stop, we'll get turned around here. Okay, we did it. Got up, got down, saw everything we wanted to see, managed to navigate our way to the airport. And once we get I tried to take that little taxiway over there before between those buildings and then hit one of them with my wings, so we won't do that again. And those lights don't appear to be in quite the right spot, but that's okay. We're just going to come right down here just so we can see Mount Shasta. There she is. Look at that thing. Man, amazing. Looks absolutely stunning. All right, I don't really have anywhere to go, so I'm just going to park right over here. And we'll get her shut down. Okay. Parking brake on, and then we'll pull over a little NavMap and take a look at everything. And we'll just click the mags off here. And of course, open the windows. All right, that one will open that one there, and this one here. Great, we're doing good. Okay, here's a little NavMap. Centering off. Okay, so here's where in the world we are. Sacramento is somewhere down in this vicinity, and there's San Fran Bay over there. And the big dam, I'm not going to zoom in on it because I don't want you to see it. I think it might be... There's a big lake by the huge dam. I think it's right down here. So if you want to spoil that flight, go ahead and check it out. But that's where the biggest dam in the country is. Like 770 feet high. We'll definitely go down there and check that out. All right, so here's the town of Redding where we left from there. And there's where we started. If you load this up just right, it will put you in the correct parking spot if you want to take off from where we took off from, or start where we started from in the parking spot there. So just pull a little NavMap. Everything will be good to go once you put it in the sim. And then we flew over the town of Redding here, and here is that sundial. Here's Turtle Bay out here. This is all part of their complex. I think this is here too. Some of this over here is, and you can see they have a neat little garden feature over there too. But check this thing out. This is the sundial. And you can't see it here because we're looking down right over the top of it. Well, you can barely see it. See those cables down there? So it goes about halfway to the bridge, and then they have a support right here that's holding up this side of it. But that is really something pretty cool. And it actually modeled in the sim without being a POI, so that's neat. And there's a water park over here too, but because of where we're sitting in the cockpit, you couldn't see it. This looks okay in the sim. You can actually see all the lines here, but there's not really any relief to it. So if you want to check out a water park, that's the one they have here in town. And here's the Keswick Dam, which I would be willing to bet probably looks pretty cool, because even that little glimpse we got of it looked pretty neat. And considering how good the Shasta looks, that might look okay, but it's going to be just tiny in comparison to the old Shasta, which is right up here. Look at that baby. And it looks jacked up here in little NavMap, but it looked good in the sim. Looked really good. They talked about maybe even making this thing even higher to double the power production capacity of it, but they put the kibosh on that because they're already having some issues with some endangered species out here, and they didn't want to have to raise the river any higher, or the lake any higher than it already was. And you can tell, look at this, there's really nothing around it until you get up to, it's way up here. This is the only thing really on the banks of this reservoir. And there's like RV parks and things like that. If it depixelates, you might be able to see it. But there's not much else out there. It looks like just a little vacation spot for folks. And then here's the Pitt River, and the terrain changed from, well, that does look awfully brown. Definitely not orange, but there is a noticeable change to green once we get out here. So maybe the sim just didn't know what to do with that when it was happening, and that's why it made everything more brown and orange out there. There's that marina you couldn't see. There's the Pitt River Bridge, across which flows Interstate 5. And there's those power lines that they actually managed to get in the sim. Imagine that. And then we cruised up over here, and there's Mount Eddy over there. You won't miss that, and you won't hit it either if you follow this flight plan. This is just a little collection of naked-topped mountains over here, which look kind of neat out the right-hand window, which, because of the size of that cockpit, we really couldn't see unless we jumped over to the co-pilot seat. But here's Black Butte, and there's the old Shasta Spiritual Retreat and the Mandala. Still don't see any naked girls down there. I don't know where they took that video. There must be some little ravines around here somewhere. But if you can get away with it, you might want to check that out, because it was strange. It was like softcore nudity. It was a back shot, not a full frontal type thing, but just weird, really weird. And there's the ski park over there where they had the most snowfall in any one storm in the U.S. And there's old Mount Shasta. Yeah, you'd have to get up over 19,000 feet, so probably 20,000 if you're going to try to cross over the top of that, which would be the service ceiling of that plane. That's why we didn't do that. And it would take forever to get up there because that thing doesn't climb fast. Circled around old Black Butte, which looked absolutely beautiful, and came into the town of Weed. And their motto down here, if you're concerned about receiving a warm reception, is "We'd like to welcome you." Get it? So lots of friendly folks down there, but I don't know. I mean, where's the town? I guess this is it? Yeah, but they had some big fires out here too. Wiped out a whole neighborhood just last year, one of them did. I think the neighborhood is called Lincoln Heights. So they've had some issues with that out here. The winds get whipping up to like 40 knots, no problem. I don't know if it's the Santa Ana winds out here. So you can see, it was a little bit tough to come in like we did, but if you wanted to fly around this way, maybe even just take a lap out this way, it'd probably be a much easier approach because you wouldn't have to do all that turning to get around these mountains and try to come down so fast. So just a heads up with that if you want to take a little bit easier approach, but we managed it just fine. And that's it. We've got some really cool flights in the hopper. I got almost 2 weeks off of work for this Christmas vacation, so a couple things that we're going to do. I got that new Mitsubishi twin turboprop plane. We're going to do a flight over the observatories at Mauna Lea and Kilauea, I guess, out there in Hawaii. That is also a really, really tall volcano, tallest in the world, as a matter of fact. So we'll check that out. There was another volcano I spotted. We're going to do La Paz up in Bolivia. Check out that city and that airport, which is just awesome. There was another huge volcano out in, let's see, where was that other one? It was the biggest eruption in the last 1,000,000 years. I've got that flight plan saved, but I can't remember where it is. So we got some cool volcanoes to check out. And then another hometown flyover. So we got all kinds of cool stuff going on. Had an absolute blast. Learned lots of cool stuff. Saw some amazing flights. Flew an amazing plane. As always, so glad you guys joined me. Can't wait to see you again in the skies. Later.